Hey guys, just kind of a short one here. We're getting into the review phase of the class. I'm going to be posting multiple videos that go over several different topics that people typically have trouble on when they kind of get down to the nitty-gritty of trying to prepare for a check ride and or a knowledge test. One of which that continuously gives people a lot of trouble and a lot of frustration is VFR on top, because a lot of people, they don't understand the rules that go along with it, and more importantly, they don't understand the proper way to ask for it and its advantages and disadvantages, which is really what an examiner is going to be looking for. So we're going to kind of go over the basic information that you need to know about it that's available out of the AIM. You can see the reference right here, Fortec 8, and that's the the most current address, the most current information on it in the 2019 AIM. Obviously, if you're watching this video and it's 2020, you're going to need to, the 2020 is out, or the 2021, whatever, you're going to need to look in the AIM and look that up just to verify all this information is correct. But as of this year, 2019, all this information is current. So starting out, what is it? Most pilots don't really even know what it is. It's the way that you need to realistically think about it is it's a special type of clearance, and I want to stress the word clearance. Okay, a clearance is something that you have to receive from ATC, and it's law binding. Okay, it's not like a traffic alert where they're just giving you information. Okay, so what you need to kind of derive from that information is, more times than not, actually most times, you're going to have to request this type of clearance. It's very similar to a contact approach. Okay, it's also legally binding. So if you violate any of the rules that we're about to talk about, you could be liable to have your certificate revoked, or you could wind up doing a 709 ride with the FAA. Whatever it is that they decide to do. So that being said, it's a special type of clearance that allows you to operate within the safety and the benefits, kind of within the IFR envelope, and yet still have some of the freedom that flight under VFR allows you. Okay, so it's kind of like it kind of goes both ways. You get the benefits of one, and you also get the benefits of the other one. We're going to talk in a little bit about the advantages and disadvantages of it, which is really what an examiner would probably be looking for if he decided to start asking you and quizzing you about this. That information you can't really find in the AIM, which is why people really struggle with it. So kind of the basic information that you need to know about it is, number one, you have to be on an IFR flight plan, and you have to be on an IFR clearance in order to be able to fly this. This isn't something that someone departing VFR out of some random airport could call an air route traffic control center and say, hey, I just departed here on VFR. I'd like to go VFR on top so I can get above this cloud layer. Well, it doesn't really work like that. It's not intended for VFR aircraft to get a freebie and climb above clouds to go VFR again. That's not what its intention is for, and for whatever reason, a lot of people think that's what it is. So you have to be on an IFR flight plan and an IFR clearance, and like we were talking about earlier, in almost every case, you're going to have to be the one to request this. It's very similar to kind of the procedures for a contact approach. Now, there are extremely rare circumstances where ATC could offer it to you if in a place where it would provide some sort of noise abatement benefit, where part of your IFR departure route doesn't conform to some kind of FAA approved noise abatement procedure. Like I said, extremely rare. I've never heard of anybody ever actually being offered that, and even if they did offer it to you, you could just reject it if you didn't want it. So kind of the proper phraseology, or the proper way to go about doing this, if I am departing IFR out of an airport and I have a clear intention of getting to the top of whatever cloud layer, or in between a cloud layer, the proper radio call to do that is your tail number to whatever controlling frequency you're talking to. It's probably going to be the departure. Or the air route traffic control center, depending on the aircraft, if the airport has a departure frequency. So your N number, your request VFR climb on top. Okay, that's very simple radio call. Now what that tells ATC, is that this aircraft and this pilot is intending to climb through the cloud layers, that are present in the area and get to where he can maintain VFR conditions that are stipulated in 91.155. Okay, so that could mean he wants to get on top of the clouds and cancel IFR, or he wants to go VFR on top to a certain point. It's kind of up to the pilot. Now, that is something that is completely within your right to request. However, that is something that if you didn't, annotate that specifically in your flight plan, is going off of, whatever ATC cleared you for when they gave you your IFR clearance. Okay, so they can put additional restrictions on you because of that. So they could, mandate it that once you get to an altitude where you think you can maintain VFR on top, you have to make a report, or kind of the opposite of that. If you're at an altitude and you get to this altitude, you have to report, okay, I can't do it here. You get to another altitude that's higher, you have to report again, okay, I can't maintain VFR on top here. Now, the really cumbersome thing they could do to you is they could enforce clearance limits, and they could give you additional routing that you didn't necessarily plan for. So that could affect your fuel burn, and that kind of goes into the disadvantages of it that we'll talk about later a little bit more specifically. But that's kind of what you need to know about, how I would actually request that and how you would receive it. Now, once we actually get up there to altitude and we're in conditions that would allow this to happen, there's 3 rules that we have to keep in mind. And this is typically where people mess up on their prep wares, their knowledge test prep, is they forget, okay, it's an IFR clearance. Do I have to maintain VFR altitudes? I don't remember. Do I have to follow the hemispherical rule? So on and so forth. The answer is yes. So you have to fly the VFR cruising altitudes that are in 91.155. That's your west evens, east odds, plus 500 feet. You also have to keep your cloud clearances. Those are stipulated at 91.155. So you should remember those. For example, if I'm in echo airspace below 10,000 feet, I have to maintain distance away from clouds of 1,000 feet above, 2,000 feet horizontally and 500 feet below. I also have to have 3 statute miles of visibility, from the cockpit. Now, you also have to comply with all the IFR rules that are pertinent to where you're at. So if I am flying off route, just because I'm VFR on top doesn't mean that I don't have to follow the ARACA, or if I am following a Victor Airway and I don't have a GPS, that means I have to fly at the MEA, even though I'm flying in VFR conditions. Okay, so it's just enough to give you, you still have all the benefits. You still have to follow the IFR rules, but you still have all the benefits. But this gives you a little bit more, freedom to more or less do what you want, altitude and route wise. Okay. Now, some pros and cons. This is what an examiner would probably lead into after he kind of asked you, tell me what I got to have in order to, operate VFR on top. What conditions have to be present for me to do that. If he asks you about advantages or disadvantages, this is basically what you need to lay out for him. So advantages is you can operate above, below, between different cloud layers. So you have a little bit more altitude convenience doing that. But the very biggest, by far the biggest advantage to VFR on top is anytime that you are not operating in the clouds, you have a reduced risk of spatial disorientation. Okay. Spatial disorientation, you should know by now, is the bane of every IFR pilot. VFR pilot, doesn't matter. It's the most dangerous thing that a pilot, in my opinion, it's one of the most dangerous things that you could ever put yourself into. Obviously, you're going to have to watch out for false horizons, because there is a chance that you could encounter some sloping cloud layers. So there's still some risk of spatial disorientation, but it's, I don't want to say exponentially, but it's drastically less than if you're flying 0-0 in a cloud. Okay. Some disadvantages to it is it can require you to climb to a very, very high altitude. And there's a lot of performance and a lot of aircraft limitations that kind of have to come to the forefront of your thought process anytime that we're doing that. So performance-wise, the higher we go, the less lift the blades produce on our rotor system, the less performance that we get out of our engine. If we don't lean the mixture, we start burning more gas, things like that. You also got to think about, is there a minimum, or excuse me, a maximum AGL altitude that the POH allows us, okay? The R-44, for example, it's not an IFR rated helicopter, but the maximum AGL altitude that you could climb to in that is 9,000 feet, and that's to get you down, in 5 minutes in case of a fire. You also got to think about, my density altitude limitations. It's obviously going to be probably colder up there, but altitude always has the dominating effect on density altitude, not your temperature. Okay. Like we were talking about earlier, ATC restrictions in the routing can be really cumbersome. They can require you to change your entire flight plan in some cases, which if you're really tight on fuel to begin with, to land with that 30 minutes of fuel and or go to your alternate and still be able to land with fly for 30 minutes of fuel, that can really put you in a tight spot. So the other disadvantage to it is there's always that risk of icing if you're climbing through multiple cloud layers because the temperature is always changing. So before you ever even attempt to ask for something like this, you need to have a very clear idea of what your goals are. Okay, so that requires you to be extremely knowledgeable about, okay, I've gotten this weather briefing, they're telling me through 5 different PIREPs that the tops of the clouds are at 5,000 feet. Okay, if I build in a margin of error of 1,000 feet, am I still going to be able to climb to that altitude, remain within my performance limitations? If they vector me, in certain different places, or if they give me this new routing, am I still going to have enough gas to get to my destination and or my alternate and still be able to fly for 30 minutes? How much of a margin of error do I have fuel-wise? Have I looked at the icing reports and seen if there's any PIREPs? What are the freezing levels for today? Things like that. So the advantages of doing something like this are good. Like we said, the biggest one is that reduced risk of spatial disorientation. Anytime you have an opportunity to do that, it's in your favor, but there's a lot of disadvantages that can come with this. So just to kind of wrap it all up, it's something that can be used to your advantage, but if you are not prepared and you really don't know what you're doing, it can actually put you in more danger than you were to begin with. So just some thoughts on that that you guys need to keep in mind. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'm going to post this on the last week's Moodle page, and I'll also post a PDF to go along with it that you guys can use. So about it for that one. Again, if you got any questions, let me know.